During the Second World War, the Germans built incredible concrete fortresses, where they hid the plans of Barbarossa and the miracle weapon, giant concrete piles, kilometers of tunnels, 1 million Reichsmarks and thousands of lives, and all in vain. None of them saved the Third Reich from collapse. In this video, you will see 10 of the most significant bunkers and buildings of the Third Reich. Learn the main technical characteristics, history, and fate of these buildings. The Valentin Bunker is a titanic structure of the Third Reich, built in 1943 to 1945 in Bremen to protect the assembly of U-boat submarines from the collapsing air raids of the Allies. Imagine a concrete monster with an area of 33,000 square meters, with a ceiling thickness of up to 7 meters and walls up to 4.5 meters, rising 27 meters above the ground. It was one of the largest bunkers in the Second World War, capable of accommodating up to 12 submarines at the same time, including the modern Type 21, the hope of the Kriegsmarine for a breakthrough in the underwater war. The construction was swallowed up by 13,000 prisoners of the Fargo concentration camp. The structure of the bunker was striking in scope. It consisted of 12 sections, divided into 1.5-meter partitions with docks, cranes, and assembly lines, and the ventilation system provided work in the conditions of bombings. Concrete for the roof was poured in 3 layers to avoid cracks, and chemical additives were used to accelerate, which weakened the structure. The bunker was planned to be equipped with anti-aircraft guns 128mm Flak 40, but they were never installed. The Germans hid the scale of the project even from the local population, disguising it as a warehouse. The roof of reinforced concrete was designed for standard bombs, but could not withstand the British 10-ton Grand Slam. In March 1945, 2 hits broke through the ceiling, crushing 1,000 cubic meters of concrete and stopping production. By that time, the bunker was only 90% completed, and not a single submarine was fully assembled. Valentin was the last in the Reich's fleet, but his story is a mixture of ambition, tragedy, and failure. The Wolf's Lair is a secret headquarters complex of the Third Reich, built in 1941 to 1944 in the forest of Gorlitz, not far from the city of Rassenburg. Imagine a complex of more than 80 bunkers and fortified buildings in the middle of dense forest, located on a protected area of 650 hectares and surrounded by several rings of barbed wire fences, minefields, observation towers, machine gun, and anti-aircraft positions. It was the brain center of the Eastern Front, where Hitler planned Operation Barbarossa and gave orders about tank offensives. Here, on July 20, 1944, Klaus von Stauffenberg blew up a bomb, barely killing the Führer. The complex was built by 3,000 workers and guarded by 2,000 SS soldiers. The design of the Wolf's Lair was striking. The main bunker of Hitler, 20 by 10 meters, had walls 2 meters thick and a ceiling of 3 meters, reinforced with steel 30mm reinforcement. The bunkers were disguised as hills, the roofs were covered with dirt, and the walls were painted green. Inside are narrow corridors, steel doors weighing 2 tons, and a ventilation system with filters against gas attacks. The electricity came from a 1.5 megawatt diesel generator, hidden in a separate block. The complex was divided into 3 zones, the first for Hitler and the elite, the second for the headquarters, and the outer perimeter with anti-aircraft guns 88mm Flak 36. The railway and the airfield provided secret supplies. Hitler spent 800 days here, managing the army through teletypes and maps. Heat in summer and frost in winter made life in the bunkers not very comfortable. Ventilation could not cope with humidity. Hitler left the Wolf's Lair for the last time on Monday, November 20th, 1944, when the Soviet offensive reached Angerburg. 2 days later, an order was given to destroy the complex. The Wolf's Lair was the heart of the Reich's military machine, but even this concrete labyrinth did not save it from defeat. The Tott Battery is an artillery bunker of the Third Reich on the Atlantic Shaft, built in 1941 to 1942 near the Grenée Cape in France. Named after the engineer Fritz Tott, it was created to shell the Douvres through the La Manche. The battery consisted of 4 casemates, each of them consisted of 2 parts, a fire chamber, where 380mm cruise missiles and 2 floors were placed under the armor tower, one of which was underground and was intended for storing ammunition and equipment. The length of the casemates was 47 meters, the width of 29, and the height of 20 meters, 8 of which were underground. The thickness of the reinforced concrete walls and roofs was 3.5 meters, which allowed them to withstand the hit of 380 millimeter shells, ordinary 4,000-pound bombs or 2,000-pound armor-piercing bombs. In addition, the battery also had at its disposal 14 passive bunkers. For barracks, a belt of 15 Tobruk's, 3 bunkers with anti-tank guns facing south and directed towards the coast, 9 French-made anti-aircraft guns, a pump station for drinking water, a hospital bunker, and an already existing farm between casemates 2 and 3, integrated into the defense system and served as barracks and observation posts. Each casemate had a supply of shells, but relied on 2 separate ammunition bunkers, located 1.5 kilometers east of the battery. Each casemate was connected to these ammunition bunkers by a cargo road and a network of narrow-gauge railroads. With a firing range of up to 55 kilometers, the guns were able to hit the Douvres and the British coast, located less than 30 kilometers from the Cape Grisnez. In optimal conditions, the firing rate was 1 shot every 18 seconds, or 3 shots per minute. The battery fired from 1942 to 1944, damaging more than 10,000 objects in the Douvres area, but not a single ship was sunk, despite the slow-moving convoys. The Tata battery opened the last fire on September 29, 1944, and was taken by the Northern New Scotland, which landed in Normandy after the pre-bombing. The Reese project is the most mysterious construction of the Third Reich, conceived in 1943 to 1945 in the Soviet mountains and under the Ksench Castle in Lower Silesia, which at that time was part of Germany and is now a part of Poland. 7 underground complexes, Vlodaz, Osovka, Sokolets, Yugovets, and others, were penetrated in the rocks with a maniacal scale. The Germans planned to create secret plants here for the Messerschmitt 262 jet engines, a storage facility for V-2 missiles, or a spare headquarters for Hitler's headquarters. The design was striking in scale. Vlodaz included 3.5 kilometers of tunnels at a depth of 60 m, with halls of 10 m height. The Ksench Castle hid an underground level of 50 m with elevator shafts and a railway for transporting equipment. The concrete walls, 1.5 m thick, were reinforced with 25 mm steel, and the ceilings were reinforced with wooden beams. The project was ultra-secret. The Nazis disguised it as a geological exploration, prohibiting the locals from approaching the mountains. The Germans planned to connect the Reese Tunnel with Berlin, a secret railway, but the project was abandoned. In Vlodaz, they found an unfinished hall with rails, possible for V-2. In May 1945, the area was taken over by the Red Army. The Soviet engineers blew up part of the tunnels, but found only empty boxes and many bodies. Reese was a concrete mirage of the Reich, where ambitions collided with reality. Flakturm is a cyclopical anti-aircraft tower of the Third Reich, built in 1940 to 1944 in Berlin, Vienna, and Hamburg to protect from Allied air raids. These concrete fortresses, with a height of almost 40 m, with 3.5 m walls and ceilings, able to withstand a direct hit of concrete bombs, at the same time served as a refuge for several tens of thousands of civilians. In addition, the towers were equipped with 105 mm anti-aircraft guns, and later paired with 128 mm Zwilling Flak 42 and 44. In addition, The towers solved the issue of radiolocation and coordination of anti-aircraft actions. In 1945, they became the last points of resistance of the Third Reich. The design of Flakturm was striking. For example, the tower in Berlin was a square structure with sides of 75 m and a height of 39 m, the walls and roofs of which were made of fortified concrete. The thickness of the walls was 2.5 m at the base, with gradual thinning up to 2 m to the lower combat platform. The thickness of the roof was 3.5 m, which allowed to withstand a direct hit of an air bomb weighing up to 1,000 kilograms. 2 cargo elevators worked up to the 5th floor. They were used to raise the calculations of anti-aircraft guns and evacuate the wounded. In each tower, to the gun platforms from the base floor on which the missile cellars were placed, a chain lift was installed to mechanize the supply of shells to the main guns. Interestingly, the guns fired at a speed of 8 shots per minute, but only 1% of the planes were shot down. Flakturm were the heavenly fortresses of the Reich, but even these colossi did not save the cities from destruction. In 1944 in Hamburg, the tower survived 300 hits without punctures. I made a detailed video about the towers, their devices, the work of calculations, and the equipment inside them. And now, at the top right, there should be a hint leading to this video. I will also indicate it in the description. Weingut 1 is an underground plant of the Third Reich, built in 1944 to 1945 in Muldorf, Bavaria, for the production of jet engines Messerschmitt 262, which the Nazis considered their miracle weapon. It was one of the most ambitious projects of the Third Reich, designed to save Luftwaffe from the bombing of the Allies. The basis of the bunker design was 12 huge reinforced concrete arches, each 95 meters wide and 32 meters high, of which 19 were below the ground level. The arches covered a deepened underground shaft, a total length of 400 meters and a width of 85 meters. The thickness of the arches reached 5 meters. In this giant recess, protected from above by concrete arches, an aviation plant was to be built, producing Jumo 004 turbojet engines. From above, the bunker was to be completely covered with earth, on which grass and trees were supposed to be planted, thereby effectively disguising the giant structure. It was assumed that the plant would have 8 levels. The total cost of the project was 26 million Reichsmarks. The construction of the bunker was carried out at an intense pace, although the impossibility of its completion in a reasonable time was already obvious. To ensure the construction of labor, a concentration camp Muldorf was built next door. Of the 10,000 workers involved in the project, 8,500 were prisoners of the concentration camp, many of whom died. By April 1945, only 7 of the 12 concrete arches were ready, and work on the internal structure of the bunker did not even begin. The bunker was eventually captured in early May 1945 by the troops of the 14th Tank Division of the U.S. Army, and later blown up. Weingut 1 was supposed to produce 400 engines per month, but did not produce a single one. Weingut 1 was a concrete monument to Hitler's glory, where the dreams of jet aviation were shattered by reality. The Epperlech bunker is a Spanish complex of the Third Reich, built in 1943 to 1944 in the Epperlech forest near Arcale, France, for the Weapons of Revenge program. Hidden 10 kilometers from Saint-Omer, it was supposed to become a protected facility for the production of liquid oxygen and pre-launch preparation and refueling of missiles aimed at London. It was assumed that the bunker could accommodate up to 100 missiles and produce enough liquid oxygen for the daily launch of 36 missiles. The bunker consisted of 3 main elements. The main part of the building was a giant structure with a width of about 92 meters and a height of 28 meters, where oxygen was produced and where missiles were collected and prepared. Its walls were up to 7 meters thick, and the working levels of the bunker were 6 meters below the ground. There were supposed to be 5 compressors installed, each of which could produce about 10 tons of liquid oxygen per day. The facility was designed to store up to 108 missiles and enough fuel to provide for 3-day launches. On the north side of the building, there was a fortified railway station of the standard track, connected to the main line of Calais-Saint-Omer in Watten. To the north of the bunker, the Germans erected a bomb-resistant power plant with a generation of 1.5 megawatts. Also, the Watton complex was connected to a radar tracking point in pre-defense, which was located in the center of the building. Since the refueled missiles could only be transported in a vertical position, their transportation was impossible, and they were supposed to be launched from here. The missiles were supposed to rise to the roof of the building by the lift and take off from it. The bunker was ready for 35% when the Allies suspected something was wrong and decided to attack the building. The destruction caused by the Allied raids was such that the Germans were forced to abandon their plans to use the bunker as a launch pad. It was decided that the less damaged central part of the structure would be used as a basis for the construction of a protected oxygen plant. The functions for launching missiles were to be transferred to the new design complex of the Bezirn's Dome. A giant concrete roof was built with a thickness of 5 meters and a weight of 37,000 tons. The work on the site continued until July 17, 1944, when the Allies used their new weapon for the first time, the 5-ton Tolboy air bombs. The concrete roof of the Aden was broken and the construction site was almost completely destroyed. Later, in February 1945, the bunker was used again for practical tests of the new Tolboy Disney bombs, developed for the U.S. Air Force. Today, Epperlek is a €9 museum with V-2 models. The successful attack of the Allied aircraft on the Epperlek bunker, built on August 27, 1943, forced the German designers to reconsider the approach to the construction of large reinforced concrete structures. It was intended to pre-build a giant reinforced concrete dome, capable of completely covering the construction site from bombings. After that, under this giant roof, which completely covered the area of work, the soil was to be dug out, and all the necessary structures for the preparation of ballistic missiles, this giant dome became the so-called Elfo Dome, or the Bezirn Dome. Its thickness was 5.1 meters, its diameter was 71 meters, and its weight was 55,000 tons. Under the dome, there was a huge octagonal underground hall with a diameter of 41 meters and a height of 33 meters. Divided into several horizontal tiers, the hall was to serve for pre-launch preparation and refueling of missiles with fuel and liquid oxygen, supplied by the oxygen plant located above. But all the internal infrastructure was not finished. The Allies noticed this structure and began to cover it with ordinary bombs, which did not give any effect. There was only one hit to the dome, and without a result. But later, new 5-ton seismic bombs were used by the Tolboy, which did their job. Dropped from a great height, the bombs accelerated to supersonic speed and pierced the ground to a depth of up to 30 meters before detonation, producing the effect of artificial earthquake. Bomb explosions destabilized the hills around so much that the site was constantly crawling. The continuation of work on the construction site was pointless. For some time, it was considered possible to use the surviving structure of the dome to place an oxygen plant under it, supplying the new mobile positions of FAU-2 with oxygen. But the landing of the Allies in Normandy and the rapid offensive of the Anglo-American troops in northern France led to the fact that on September 5th, the dome was in the hands of the Allies. The Elfo Dome became a concrete embodiment of revenge that collapsed under the blows of aviation. Mittelwerk is an underground plant of the Third Reich, built in 1943 to 1945 in the mountain of Constein, near Nordhausen, for the production of FAU-2 missiles and aircraft engines. Hidden from the Allied bombings, it was the key to the program of the miracle weapon. The complex included about 20 kilometers of tunnel, capable of producing up to 600 missiles per month, fired at London and Antwerp. The tunnels were built by about 60,000 prisoners of the Dora-Mittelbau concentration camp, many of whom died of hunger, diseases, and collapses. In April 1945, American troops captured the facility, finding unfinished missiles and thousands of bodies. The structure was striking in scope. Tunnels up to 50 meters deep, carved in granite, had halls 15 meters high for the assembly of FAU-2. The railway transported missiles, and the cranes, with a load capacity of 20 tons, lifted them to the conveyors. Here was brought part of the preserved equipment with destroyed by the Allies' objects, in particular, compressors for the production of liquid oxygen. During February-April 1945, the plant in Nordhausen built anti-aircraft missiles Typhoon and jet fighters Henkel 162. Also here was collected in total 2,275 FAU-1 missiles. British historian Richard Overy notes, there is some evidence that at the Mittelbau-Dora plant small spherical bombs were stored, containing radioactive waste. But there is no material evidence for this, or they are classified. The Red Army occupied Middelburg on July 5, 1945, after the American military took out most of the trophy equipment, and in the middle of 1948, destroyed both entrances to the tunnel system. Historian Michael Neufeld calls Middelburg the concrete hell of the Reich, where technologies were fed by human victims. Führerbunker is Hitler's last refuge, built in 1944 under the Reich Chancellery in Berlin. Hidden at a depth of 8.5 meters, it was a desperate attempt of the Third Reich to hide from the advancing Red Army. The complex consisted of the Verbunker, the front, that is, the upper bunker, built in 1936, and the Führerbunker, which was located 2.5 meters deeper than the Verbunker, on the southwestern side of it, and was built by 1944. They were connected by a knee-high staircase with armored doors on both sides. The Verbunker, in turn, was located 1.5 meters deeper than the basement under the foyer of the old Reich Chancellery building. In addition to a greater depth, the Führerbunker was much stronger. The thickness of the upper concrete block was 3 meters. 30 small rooms were protected by a slab 4 meters thick and had exits to the main building and a backup exit to the garden. The complex was self-sufficient, but located below the level of groundwater, and it was very damp. The pumps constantly pumped water. There was a diesel generator for power supply. For communication, there were telegraph and teletype networks telex, a telephone hub, and an army radio station with an external antenna. By the end of the war, due to the general decline of the Reich, Hitler received most of the news from BBC radio broadcasts and courier mail. But he could not sit in the bunker. After the end of the war, the bunker was visited by soldiers, diplomats, political figures. For example, on July 14th, the Chancellery and the bunker were examined by Churchill. In this photo, Churchill tries to sit on Hitler's chair and feel like the head of a Third Reich. The Führerbunker became the concrete grave of the Third Reich, where the Führer's ambitions found their end. The Germans poured concrete into the dream of victory, but 10 bunkers, from Valentin to the Führerbunker, proved the inexhaustibility of this dream. After the end of the war became different and static objects could no longer become a serious obstacle. And which object impressed you the most? Write about it in the comments.